Here is the voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about. Saturday, the National Day of Hate. I didn't make that up. The National Day of Hate, brought to you by neo-Nazi groups across the country. And yes, they're planning on big events. New York, Chicago, cities across this country where the neo-Nazis come out and I pledge their support to, I don't know. What we do know, anti-Semitism going to be high on Saturday because they're supposed to be dropping banners and placing stickers all over the place, plastering walls with flyers, scrawling graffiti, wherever they can graffiti. And you go, this is what I love about the country. I love the fact that crazy people can do crazy things as long as they don't hurt others. As long as you're not screwing with somebody else, as long as your rights don't infringe on somebody else's. Yeah, go ahead. Have your little Nazi rally. At least that's my thinking. Now, don't be surprised. And this is I guess the world that I grew up in. Have your little Nazi rally. Have your little, like Forrest Gump. I'm not gonna, have your little party. Have your little party. Go do your thing. Until you do something to someone else. Now when that happens, now there are consequences. I had a bunch of people today say, well, it should be National Punch a Nazi Day. I go, I'm not against National Punch a Nazi Day if they deserve it. If they're peacefully assembling, if they're doing their little thing, whatever that is, being angry with each other and whatever it is Nazis do. I don't necessarily have a problem with it. It's when they start doing Nazi stuff. That's when I have a problem with this. And the sad reality is there's a political party in this country that has been courting the Nazis for a very long time. Look, you go back to Pat Buchanan. The joke back then was, his speeches were much better in the original German. So they've always courted this formerly underground, secretive bunker group who are now, very much vocal. We're going back to the parades in the streets. You go back to 100 years ago when they were doing this because we're going to take down those civil rights things. So we're going back to these displays, and for me, it got me thinking about my high school government teacher again. And, it's one of those moments where you go, I remember learning about the Federalist Papers, and Federalist 10 to be specific, which talked about factions. I mean, we had, Marjorie Trainwreck, with her, we're going to have a national divorce. This is exactly what the founders were afraid of. They were afraid of this kind of breaking apart. And look, Madison believed that factions were inevitable because, look, human nature. We all have different ideas. We all have different opinions, different beliefs, different, stations in life, different, levels of property and wealth and whatever. All of the ways that you can divide us, we're different. You name it, there are ways that we can be sliced and diced and pitted against each other. And ask the wealthy. They know exactly how to do it. As long as we, are different, and as long as we hold different beliefs, we group differently. We form alliances differently. We want to, and this is where segregation happens. We go around like-minded people, hold similar ideas, similar beliefs, go to the same churches, that kind of stuff. So as we group up, we create these factions. Now, this is one of those things that Madison was concerned about. Because they understood that was going to happen. He said, basically we can do a couple of things as people go into these factions. We can break them up. We can try and control them, but neither are a really great option. And the thing is we're going to get into our little groups. We're going to find are factions, and sometimes these factions are going to work against, common sense, against public interest, and yeah, sometimes they're going to infringe on others' rights, which is why you need to have a strong central government. This is the reason that the Federalist Papers were arguing. You need a strong federal government to hash out these moments. The idea of minority rights. And as he pointed out in Federalist 10, there are two methods of curing the mischiefs of faction. He wrote, one, by removing its causes, the other by controlling its effects. He said there are, again, two methods by removing these causes of factions. One, by destroying the liberty, which it is essential to the existence. And two, the other, giving every citizen the same opinions, the same passions, and the same interests. The second, he said, was expedient, is impractical, and the first would be unwise. And I agree. You're never going to control the passions, the ideas, the values of everyone. So you got to figure out how we're going to, in this big melting pot that I used to learn about as a kid on Saturday mornings on Schoolhouse Rock, in this big melting pot, we got to figure out how we get along. Now, the sad reality is you've got the Marjorie Taylor Greens and that group doing everything they can possibly do to push these factions to the maximum. And look, we're being fractured. We're being sliced and diced, and we're being pushed into these factions. And look, the Republican machine, honestly and truthfully, you have to give credit where credit is due. They're masterful at this. They say there's a master's course in how to do some things. They've got the PhD level division going on. And you see all of this stuff going, the culture war that they've pushed to the extreme. They keep force feeding us all of this nonsense. So why? Well, corporate America and the wealthy can continue to rob us blind and exploit us. And for me, it's really that simple, because you look at the comments coming out, you name the topic, and you look at the alignment of a number of people, and you find out where the factions are. Follow the money. It's simple. For instance, I look at Tennessee. Here's a perfect example of using virtually a non-issue to raise insanity, to raise people's blood pressure, to keep force-feeding the outrage candy. Understand, Tennessee is the state with the 11th highest poverty rate. Child poverty even higher. And what are they spending their time doing? Are they figuring out how to maybe get to 12 or 13 or 14? No. They've decided that they're going to pursue legislation to ban drag shows in public and sex changes for minors. So no more of this stuff. Now look, here's the thing. We can have honest conversations about whether you should have drag shows for children and sex changes, and which personally not in favor of. But they're masterful at pushing this issue because it's almost non-existent for the vast majority of people. But they take that one little kernel, that one little grain of sand, and man, they can blow it up. They can make, what's that thing, a mountain out of a molehill? This is what this is. Now, I say all the time, Democrats lose these fights often because they get into paragraphs. Their explanations, and they got to explain, and it's just long, drawn out. It's simple for me. Life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. You have the right to do what you want. Just like the Nazis can hate anyone they want to hate. I'm not going to get inside their ears and try and figure out how they're going to like somebody. Don't care. It's when that hate then turns into driving a car into a crowd of people, or shooting people or beating people, or the things that we've seen our tiki torch friends do. But this is, again, one of these moments where Republicans are masterful at the messaging. Well, I don't know anybody who wants their kids to sit and watch drag shows. But is that in any school district that you are around? The answer is no. There may be one or two, and boy, they blow this out. And as far as the sex changes for minors, I can tell you one thing I know for certain, and this is something conservatives used to believe. I don't want government telling me what I'm going to do with my children in a very delicate situation. I don't have all the answers, but I know the one thing I don't want. I don't want a government of zealots, especially zealots, the Glenn Youngkins of the world, for instance, the Ron DeSantises of the world, the Greg Abbotts. I don't want them making decisions for anyone. And this is where conservatives true conservatives who understand their ideology, this is where they used to, we don't want government making those choices. Because when you make a broad, no, none of this, ever, when you make a law that is basically a hammer, everything's a nail. And there's so much that we don't know about this. So for me, I go, the parents who are the advocates of the children, they're probably the best to help make that decision, with doctors who are informed and psychologists and psychiatrists and all the people along this process. That's probably where that should be. Now, should the professions, be a little more cautious? Maybe, I don't know. But again, I know one thing. I know I don't want government deciding these things, especially with a across-the-board blanket kind of law that's meant to stifle anything. Because this is what Republicans do well. And then, look, they do it masterfully. Give them credit. They are fabulous at taking kernels of reality and blowing them in. They're masters at taking the exception and making them the rule. And this is one of those moments where you go, it's about time that you, me, us start pursuing this life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. And look, I know a lot of people are going to be mad. I'm going to get a lot of hate email. Rick@thericksmithshow.com. Please make sure you get the address right. I'm not against the Nazis marching. I think it's better to know who our Nazi neighbors are so that we can shun them, so that we don't have to deal with them, so that when they're nice to our face, we know their true natures. For me, that's the reality. I want to know who you are, because when you tell me, I'm going to believe you. And this idea that, well, he's a good Nazi. I'm sorry, I'm not buying it. So for me, we've got to break down these factions, because the idea that Madison had was by having all of these factions, and we want to encourage them, but by having them, they have to compromise. They have to come together. There has to be some unity. So to hear Marjorie Three Names go off about a national divorce, another civil war, makes me know, one, she's never read the Federalist Papers. Two, she knows nothing about the founding fathers who were afraid of this, which is why they weren't into pure democracy. And three, minority rights are important. I mean, we went through, the McConnell years of him, preaching about minority rights. In fact, we're still hearing about it in the filibuster reform. This is a moment where we can be true to our ideals and still hold people accountable. Now, I understand police in New York and Chicago and major cities across the country will be on high alert on National Hate Day. And understand, if this is now who we are, the rest of the world is looking around going, you got Nazis. There they are. Question that comes to me is, who's going to invade our country to help fight off the Nazis? Interesting times. I want to hear your thoughts. So email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Going to take a quick break. Right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. For working people. Come to talk.
We are AFGE, the American Federation of Government Employees. We represent 700,000 federal and D.C. government workers who are the vital threads of the fabric of American life. We support our nation's military. We take care of our nation's veterans. We protect our nation's borders. We respond to our nation's crises and natural disasters. We provide services to our nation's seniors. The American Federation of Government Employees. We work for America.
The phone lines are open. Give Rick a call at 1-866-416-RICK. That's 1-866-416-7425.
We are AFGE, the American Federation of Government Employees. We represent 700,000 federal and D.C. government workers who are the vital threads of the fabric of American life. We support our nation's military. We take care of our nation's veterans. We protect our nation's borders. We respond to our nation's crises and natural disasters. We provide services to our nation's seniors. The American Federation of Government Employees. We work for America.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So I just happened to check the Twitters during the break, and Dan Quayle is trending on Twitter. Remember, come with me if you will. For those of you old enough to remember, you remember when misspelling the word potato was enough for voters to go, nope, too dumb to be president? Remember that? The good old days. Yeah, wow. You know, anything I said bad about Dan Quayle from 1988 to 1992, I'm sorry. Wow. I knew the GOP was bad. I knew they were heading in the wrong direction for a very long time, but wow. That said, Mike Pence is nearing the decision. Mike Pence is on the way to making his decision whether he's going to run for president in 2024. And let me be the first to tell you, he doesn't stand a snowball's chance. Nope. Nobody likes Mike Pence. So we'll see how that plays out. Now, interestingly enough, Pence came out and declared his support for the war in our reaction to the war in Ukraine. Went on to rebuke fellow Republicans who have, how's a good way of putting this? I'm not going to go that they're taking Russian propagandists' money, but it sure seems a lot like it. You know, I'm not going to say that the people over at the F channel don't have a direct line to the Kremlin, but it kind of seems like it. It kind of seems like there's a lot of people on the right who are, and some on the far left too, who are siding with Putin, which is bizarre to me. It is, because this is just one of those moments where you go, I don't know, I thought the Republican Party was better than this, but it is where they are now. Mike Pence gonna maybe he's gonna announce during CPAC, because he's not going. So maybe this will be, hey, I've made up this big thing. I haven't decided. I'm not going to CPAC. Maybe that's when he will when he'll jump in. Now his president, Donald Trump's got a plan to end the war in Ukraine. He's got a plan. His solution, here it comes, because he says he could do it in 24 hours. He said he would get people in a room, he'd knock heads and get it done. And I'm going, hold on a second. That get her done thing, that's somebody else's. That's trademark infringement. I definitely know he's not bright enough to come with that. Just saying. Now, Mitch McConnell has come out and said that it's time for the U.S. to wake up to the threat that Russia poses to the rest of the world. Here, as we go towards the first anniversary of the war in Ukraine, and I had a bunch of people, jump on the MTG train. We need to know where each and every dollar of our tax dollars is being spent. And look, I want to know that our tax dollars aren't being wasted and aren't going to oligarchs and aren't, lining the pockets of nefarious characters. I'm with you on that. But here's the thing. This is why you have security clearance. This is why you run committees. This is the reason that we hire representatives to go in and look out for us, not to get attention, not to say, hey, look at me. Because I started thinking about it today. Think about, back before World War II. Now, we had some bomb throwers. We had some people who were against the war, but they were against the war for, I think of Jeanette Rankin from Montana. She was against the war, World War I and World War II, just because she was a pacifist. But you had the Bush, the Prescott Bushes of the world, who were making lots of money off the Nazi war machine. You had that group, that America First group, those business types who are going, hey, we're making a lot of money off this. Let's not rock the boat. I get that kind of feel here. that, hey, we're making money off Russia. Let them go. They just want Ukraine. They're not going to go anywhere else. Which is interesting because I had a listener send me a thing saying that, as a percentage of GDP, the United States is not giving the most money. Because we give a lot of money because our GDP is so big. But he sent me the Council on Foreign Relations report that shows that we're actually fifth as a measure of GDP. And you go, well, who are the other ones? Well, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Poland, then us, then Bulgaria. And you go, let's see. For those of us who didn't fail geography, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Poland, that's kind of like a straight line. That's kind of like, wait a minute, that's the next step after Ukraine. It's in their interest for Ukraine to do well because they know it's them next. And Bulgaria as well. I mean, they're all right there. And and we're there. And why would we be interested in this? Well, because the reality is, once those states fall, once those countries fall, and we reconstitute the good old former USSR, but this time not in a communist model, this time in a capitalist communist model, where we have communist-like dictators over a free market system that has no problem with slave labor and capitalism, that's a problem. Now, what's interesting is, some military experts that I've listened to, they've said that we better hope Ukraine does well and stops Russia, because if they do go to Poland, Russia cannot compete with NATO. There's no way Russia will win a ground war with NATO forces. There's just not. They're just not that good of a military. They just don't have that kind of fighting skill. They usually just throw people. The fact that they've lost over 100,000 soldiers in 1 year. Let that sink in for a minute. They've lost over 100,000 in 1 year. And, we spend a lot of time talking about how many people were killed during the Vietnam War. And you go, you think about, what was it, like 52,000? And that was over several years. You think about in 1 year, you had this many, over 100,000, kind of makes you go, maybe there's a problem. Over a 10-year period, we lost 53,220 soldiers in Vietnam. That's over a 10-year period. In 1 year, they've lost 100,000. And you think about every war that they've ever been in, they've never lost less than 500,000-600,000 soldiers. So if this happens, if Ukraine goes down, they're going to go into Poland. There's already documentation. There's already plans in place. Putin's already said this stuff, and what that means is that NATO has to get involved. And I hear people, they shouldn't get NATO involved. No, this is where NATO has to get involved, and why Ukraine wanted to be part of NATO. A national self-determination. And the reason that I support it is not because I'm pro-war, but because you've got to take on bullies. We're a country that takes on bullies. We don't protect the dictators. And it's interesting that you got someone like Trump, a bully who seems to always acquiesce to the bullies. His true love over there in North Korea. And that guy in Moscow with that display in Helsinki, that's our tough guy? I want to hear your thoughts. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1908. That was the day the United States Supreme Court decided the case Mueller versus Oregon. It was a landmark decision in the realm of protective labor legislation. It restricted the workday to 10 hours for women. Laundry owner Kurt Mueller required his female employees to work more than 10 hours a day against Oregon's labor law. The Supreme Court upheld his conviction and fine. Protective labor legislation was a product of the reform social movements of the progressive era. Reformers like Jane Addams worked to protect women from the industrial dangers that bred physical and moral harm to women. The decision drove a class-based wedge within the women's movement that lasted for much of the 20th century. Working-class women generally supported protective labor legislation like Mueller, but equal rights advocates like Alice Paul opposed it. They argued that protective legislation like Mueller rested on stereotypes regarding the differences between men and women. These differences often fueled anti-women discrimination, state control, and financial dependency. As well, critics remarked the ruling set a precedent for women's biology as childbearers as a basis for separate legislation. Only later would working-class critics note that the ruling did not cover domestics, agricultural workers, or white-collar workers. The 1938 Fair Labor Standards Act would supplant some parts of Mueller with its guarantees for workers of both sexes. Many working-class women would later welcome the passage of Title VII of the Civil Rights Act in 1965, which prohibited employment discrimination. Some would concede the many flaws of protective labor legislation that held women back. But women's rights advocates would continue to debate protective legislation and the Equal Rights Amendment well into the 1970s.
No one needs another outrage to worry about, but here's one that could literally be your last worry. Our hospitals are killing us. Not that the staffers are going room to room snuffing out patients, of course, but hospital owners and top executives are nonetheless killing thousands of ill Americans entrusted to their care. They are doing it by deliberately short-staffing their facilities and shortchanging sick and injured people they're richly paid to serve. At the core of this outrage is a fatal structural flaw in our healthcare system, namely that these are no longer our hospitals. Instead of being public or nonprofit entities for the common good, focused squarely on patients, hospitals today tend to be private operations controlled by corporate profiteers. Pitting patients against profits is no way to run a hospital, for it means money will ultimately rule over health and over life itself. Ask a nurse. These dedicated professionals are the solid pillars of American health. More than doctors and way more than administrators, nurses make a hospital function, providing the primary care and constant on-site monitoring that are the essence of an ethical, healthy system. Yet, thousands have already fled the work they love. Another third plan to leave this year, and thousands more are going on strike. Why? Because the profit system demands massive staff cuts, leaving way too few nurses to meet the basic needs of patients, causing burnout among nurses and unnecessary deaths of people they care for. A damning 2021 study revealed that forcing fewer nurses to tend to an ever larger caseload effectively killed more than 4,000 New York hospital patients in the previous 2 years alone. This is Jim Hightower saying, yet the corporate powers insist on treating nurses as just a cost to be cut, arguing that hospitals must have staffing flexibility. In other words, cut nurses, raise profits.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So, ticking down to National Hate Day. You believe that? National Hate Day? Our neo-Nazi friends are going to... I think it should be at least somewhat entertaining. You know, to watch these people come... You know, like... It's kind of like when I was a kid growing up in the projects. When you turn out the lights and all the cockroaches came running out, and then you would then turn the light on and they would scurry back into their holes. Yeah, it's kind of like that. Anyway, here to share some thoughts on the National Day of Hate. Someone who I think is an expert on following these idiot groups. I've asked my friend Zach Roberts to come talk with us. He's a photojournalist. You may know his work from Charlottesville, getting the guy in the garage, beating somebody with a... Just nuts. But Zach, thanks for taking time for us.
No time, anytime.
So, National Day of Hate. Thoughts?
Look, if these days come along, there's different groups that have like either monthly or bi-yearly or whatever dates that they like kind of like call upon their people to go out and sticker things or harass people and that sort of thing. And this is another one of those. The kind of the only difference here is that It's organized by the National Socialist Movement, Nazis. They marched to Charlottesville. Thankfully, after that big lawsuit that happened at Charlottesville, most of the groups they've been kind of financially drained and kind of like disheartened and disorganized. But this is something they've been trying to continually trying to go through rebranding. I mean, like this is George Lincoln Rockwell's like OG. Like this is the original, like for the people that have been either 1950s Nazis, American Nazis. Like this is like the evolution of like how we gone through over 70 years. It's come to these these losers that basically they're just going to probably. I mean, I always hope this is the worst I hope. Is likely what they're really going to do is they're going to maybe spray paint some things, harass some people, and hopefully, as we were saying before we started recording, hopefully, somebody, what I like is, as you use the cockroach metaphor, is like I like when the cockroaches come out because that's when I can take photos of them. And so days like this is that I don't like them organizing offline in their little Telegram chat rooms and stuff like that. Those things are hard to find. It's hard to match up people's faces. I like when they come out, I can take photos of them, and then we can find out, who amongst us, are decide that, we really like to have the Nazi tattoo on our chest or something like that.
Yeah,
so.
no, when people tell you who they are, believe them. And I want to know who they are. Yeah. So this is why I want them to come out of the shadows. But, here's the thing. So I guess what this National Day of Hate is, because this isn't a positive thing. I mean,
no.
there were some positive, I was expecting, the Nazis with coloring books and stuff like that, to try and at least, hey, we're good Nazis. This isn't the good Nazi message.
No. I mean, this is there's different cities across the country that are basically on high alert. New York City has recently, people have been I don't believe it's this group. It's a different group. I won't give them credit for naming them. Have been harassing people coming out of theater, like Broadway shows. That have like Jewish overtones, like stories about Jewish people and things like that. And so, I mean, just literally, I was covering the which I assume we'll get to later on. I was covering the Rage Against the War Machine rally, and one of the old Nazis that I photographed in Charlottesville at the Unite the Right rally was back out and relabeled himself as a patriotic socialist. He's still got the Nazi tattoo on his chest, the swastika, but he's rebranded himself on that. So this is, once again, this is like people just coming out there. Like I said, I really hope that nothing really dramatic comes out of this, other than the kind of spray painting, stickering. I mean, I live in Norfolk, Virginia, and just last week we had a different group. They throw flyers in little Ziploc bags with some corn in it, so it gets weighed down or whatever. They throw them on people's in front of people's lawns. Sometimes, usually people that they identify as Jewish, or in front of synagogues and that sort of thing. And that's what they do as a trying to spread their message, which I'm never quite sure how this like gets people motivated. Like even if you do believe in that thing, I get to throw flyers out at people. It's I don't know. I
get the litter.
It's just all kind of pathetic.
Yeah. I get the litter.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So how, again, my thought is, how come nobody goes after him, arrests them for littering? Is it like $500 for littering per incident?
I mean, they usually do. I mean, it's just like the group Patriot Front that I followed before in DC and photographed them a bunch. They go around and sticker like late at night, or they'll film it and that sort of thing, make cute little videos for their Telegram and for each other to I don't know.
Do whatever. I don't want to know what Nazis do.
I
have no interest in knowing what Nazis do. But here's the thing, and and I give you credit, because you're one of those guys who gets out there and gets into this stuff. I mean, I look at the photo that you took in Charlottesville. That I'm surprised you didn't get beaten.
I mean, thankfully, the one of DeAndre Harris getting attacked. Thankfully, his friends came along, and another journalist, Chuck Modi, gave one of them a boot. I was too far away to do anything, and also I was terrified, and I had a gun next to me too. So, but I wouldn't be the first person to admit that I'm not going to take on 7 people. I'm not that good of a fighter. As I was saying before, the first time I've been in a fight when I was like 19. but yeah, so no, I mean, the sad thing is that they keep popping up. Like I said, like photographed one, a couple of them in DC just last week. And so, I mean, like we talk about Unite the Right rally, we talk about Charlottesville a lot, but the number of rallies, the number of groups the number of times that I photographed these people since, what has been a little over 5 years, has been, dozens of times that they keep arriving. I mean, you all saw the photos of a lot of these same guys. The guys that broke into the Capitol were the guys that were also at the Unite the Right rally. The Venn diagram of that is basically a complete circle.
Yeah.
So
No, and the reality is the same troublemakers.
Exactly.
So there's a point at which you go, when you look at the Marjorie Taylor Greene frame, there's some people we should be, getting rid of. We should be divorcing some of them from the rest of us, and this would be a good place to start. You're listening to the Rick Smith Show with Zach Roberts. He's a photojournalist. He also one of the guys who works with Greg Palast, our friend. You can check out some of the work that he's done there at gregpalast.com. You brought up the Rage Against the War Machine rally, and it's one of those things that I go, it's curious to me that there's a lot of money into this. I'm going to go out on a limb and say I got to think there's Russian money in here, because it wasn't just the neo-Nazis and these far out right groups. There were some left-leaning folks there as well. I mean, Jill Stein was there, and I know all my friends are going to say she's a Russian plant too, and I'm not getting into that. Not touching it. Probably true, but still not touching it. But it just seems interesting that the messaging that's coming out of that.
I mean, look at David Swanson and Dennis Kucinich were there. Very few people, I think, can kind of, especially David Swanson, like his bona fides when it comes to like anti-war stuff. He's literally like written the book on it, like of the modern anti-war movement. But unfortunately, there are people who can't be convinced otherwise to not march alongside people who either very clearly, like, at least, I mean, I don't even know. I don't even think Russian plants or like Russian whatever, like they come out straightforward and say that they support the Russian cause. They believe that Russia was the country that was wronged. They have this insane idea that because of NATO, because of expansion of NATO into, towards Russia, that meant that Russia was basically, we poked the bear, and thus that was okay for Russia to invade a sovereign nation. Yeah. Not all these people will say, well, sovereign nations get to, because many of them are libertarians and many of them are nationalists and things like that. They'll argue that, nations get to decide what they want to do and things like that. It was just like, but for some reason, Ukraine doesn't have a right to join NATO, or Poland doesn't have a right, or Finland or whatever. These countries don't have sovereign rights. That's because America has been influenced. There's a grand conspiracy that America has been influencing all of it. It's just like Russia hasn't been influencing. There's an influence battle continually in Eastern Europe. There has been since those two countries existed, and Russia, by the way, allowed Ukraine and those countries to exist as a sovereign nation, and weren't continually committing genocides of their people when it was a Russian, Soviet bloc state. So like this idea that Russia is the good guy, or can even be argued. And again, Russia is, in quotes, Putin. It's Putin. It's not the Russian people. The Russian people don't want to go to Kiev and die in the streets there. They don't want to do that. Just the same, in the same way that a lot of Americans didn't want to be shipped off to Baghdad and Fallujah. Like, I mean, this is, they're being pulled out and sent there. And so all that Ukraine is doing is trying to defend itself. And yeah, America's helping a lot. So because it's within our interest to not have Russia start marching when they start deciding, well, maybe, we used to have control over Eastern Germany. Yeah. like maybe that's a justification. I mean, this idea is a thing. Both the United States and both Russia are imperialist powers within the world. And so anyone denying that both powers have issues is nuts. But this idea when it comes to Ukraine that Russia is somehow the good guy, it's nuts. And also, I mean, look, we need to go to a peace. I don't think anyone is arguing that we don't need to find a peaceful solution. And the peaceful solution is that Russia needs to back up and go back to their country and leave Ukraine. And that's the peaceful solution. Yep. This idea that Biden is somehow going to be able to go to Putin and say, we need, and then concede the Sudetenland and concede Eastern Ukraine to Russia is completely nuts that we would do that. And yeah, so
no, it would be like Russia invading us, because there are Nazis here. We've got neo-Nazis. So
Yeah,
the justification to go into Ukraine is they're Nazis there. So
I
it would
mean,
be like coming here and saying, we're taking over Georgia.
I used to live in Alaska. There are 100% there are Nazis in Alaska. I have photographed them. I know of them. They're 100% there. There's members of far right-wing militias, anti-Semitic, in other words, Nazis. And if Russia then should have the justification to march across or take ships across the Bering Strait and go and take Nome, I guess. I mean, this idea that like, oh, it's somehow because there's Nazis in a nation. No, we need to deal with the nation. Does Ukraine need to deal with their Nazi problem? Yes, they do. Does America need to deal with it? Does Russia, who also has, they may not have the National Socialist Party in very specific, Nazi form, but they have people who would believe in every single other tenet. They're a Christian Orthodox nation, and Putin is pushing the same nationalist, far-right Christian ideals that many of the Nazi and extreme far-right groups in America are. He's doing this thing, except he's the president, except he's the leader of the nation. I mean, the idea we could also get on a realm of the idea that he has been duly elected by his people in free and fair elections over the last 30 years or 20 years somehow. Yeah. I'd rather believe that Kennedy won Chicago, but
Wow. Okay, there you go. No, but this is the thing that gets me. I look at this and I grew up in the 80s, where Russia was, the enemy. I can't get it between my ears that the Republican Party, or at least a good faction of the Republican Party, is all on board. In fact, the messaging that you see coming out of some of these representatives, people sitting in Congress talking about we need to pull back funding and we need to, it's hard to take.
I mean, you can definitely have the argument. I think that whether our massive funding of it and the fact that the nation seems to be equally ignoring Ohio, like in compared to what you think, those are arguments that one can have. Whether they are fair arguments, whether they are honest arguments, I won't go so far as to say that. But I mean, I would love to see the American war machine being drawn back in the $1 trillion budget that we spend. Everything, but like if we are fighting wars, if we are doing this, this is I don't want to go so far as to say like this is the closest thing to World War II, where it's like kind of a fair war that we need to get involved, but it kind of is. I don't know. I mean, like I don't know. I mean, like it's different parties, and it's this idea of you have a nation that is expanding beyond its borders and trying to take over sovereign nations that are allied with us. I don't know what we're supposed to do. Like, are we like, what is exactly is the, I mean, I get it. Like Ron Paul spoke at this thing. Ron Paul is not anti-war. And this is this argument that I keep hearing from people. He is an isolationist.
Right.
He is part of the Do Nothing Party, which used to be the Libertarian Party. And now the Libertarian Party is basically, people say have been taken over, but it's always been this way. It is a white nationalist, anti-immigrant, isolationist party. And that's the way, that's what it's always been, as much as we want to disagree or whatever, but like that's what it's always been. And that's what people are saying, that's like, oh, we need to not bother with other people. It's like, okay, well then, but the problem is that other people are bothering people who are allies with us. I was in Euromaidan, I the last couple days of it, thankfully I missed most of the like real action there, but I was there in Kiev and talking to the people who've just fought like hell to basically fight against Russian expansionism within their country, and to say that they want to be part of whatever the West is in the definition. That's what they said that they wanted to be, or at least they didn't want to be controlled by by the media and by the Russian media and by the Russian oligarchs. And they stood up and fought. And for some reason, that's still not good enough for a lot of the people, like the Rage Against the War Machine. That, again, that's all a CIA. There's all these great conspiracies that Alex Jones seems to love so much, and has somehow puttered on its way over to people that pretend to be progressive and pretend to be part of the left, which they're not.
It's interesting to watch. And so on National Hate Day, where are you going to be holed up, and what do you think you're going to see?
I'm unfortunately in Norfolk. We've had a bunch of anti-Semitic flyering lately. Patriot Front seems to have a presence here. And I hate to say, one of the biggest things is that we have a lot of the, Pat Robertson era Christian, far-right Christian colleges that are around here. So whenever you go to these rallies, a lot of times you see people that are from this area in here. The whole Hampton Roads area. One of the reasons I moved down here is because unfortunately this is a center of really truly a center of hate in America. And so I'll be here just basically keeping my ear to the ground.
And using religion as a justification, again, another one of those bizarre things. But yeah. Zach, I appreciate the time. I'd like to say I can't wait to see what you come up with, but I hope it's a boring day.
We always have such great chats.
But good talking with you, brother. I wish the best. Stay safe.
Thanks so much. You too.
Wow. I got to tell you, guys got stones. Not me, man. You're not going to catch me. You're not going to catch me surrounded by Nazis taking pictures. But I'm glad he does. I want to hear your thoughts. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Quick break. Right back.
The phone lines are open. Give Rick a call at 1-866-416-RICK. That's 1-866-416-7425.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1965. That was the day the Drug and Hospital Employees Union Local 1199 sent a telegram to President Lyndon Baines Johnson. The message declared the union's stand against U.S. involvement in the Vietnam War. They were the first union local to take an official stand against the war. However, it should not have surprised anyone that Local 1199 was willing to take such a public stand. From their founding, they have been deeply committed to broad social justice unionism. The union started in 1932 in New York City. In the beginning, their membership was mostly Jewish men working in drugstores. During their first decade, they led pickets for a living wage and against segregation. During the 1950s, they held organizing drives in the city's not-for-profit hospitals. This brought many African American and Latino women into the union. These workers were often paid wages as low as $32 per week and worked extremely long hours. The union helped them win a $100 a week minimum wage. The union had become an important voice for workers in the city's nonprofit hospitals. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. called Local 1199 the authentic conscience of the labor movement. The union expanded its organizing beyond New York in 1969. They helped organize a successful strike of hospital workers in Charleston, South Carolina. From there, they launched organizing campaigns of hospital workers in other states. Over the years, the union has stood in solidarity with Cesar Chavez and Dolores Huerta's efforts to organize farm workers. They opposed apartheid in South Africa. They were also an early opponent of the war in Iraq. Today, the local is affiliated with SEIU, the Service Employees International Union. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
Yeah, I gotta tell you, I give Zach credit, man. You're not gonna catch me surrounded by Nazis. But some of the photographs that he has taken over the years are just phenomenal. It really encapsulates the kind of hatred that's being stoked every day in the name, and this is the part, in the name of religion. That's the part that gets me. Because again, I grew up in the Catholic Church at a period when they were talking about peace and social justice, love thy neighbor as thyself, that kind of stuff, and to see the kind of, just visceral hatred, it's really remarkable, and to see us being torn on those lines more and more by elected officials, by people that are in positions of power, just. Well, it's. I guess it's the world we now live in. Let's go to the phones. Got Alice on one. How we doing, Alice?
We're doing okay. Just wanted to say that I don't think that anyone that has a bit of intelligence has not noticed the uptick in the what do I want to call call it the recruitment, I guess, for the white nationalist militia groups. My son actually knows someone that he went to high school with that has gotten involved with that. And I've noticed that a few people that have left-leaning tendencies seem to have become brainwashed, and I've had a cousin that got involved with that, but the left-leaning ones seem to be being brainwashed by Russian propaganda. So I don't know what we're going to do, Rick, but have a good evening.
Thanks so much, Alice. No, what we have to do about it is we have to call them out, and this is why I've said, look, let them have their little Nazi rally, let them come out of the cracks, out of the woodwork, and let's find out who they are. And then, as part of society, you deal with that. The worst thing that happens is when people, and this is where, as a working class liberal, I'm a free speech advocate. I think there should be no words that you could cancel for saying. He's going to say it. Yeah, look, if you say dumb things, when I was a kid, there were no words off limits. People said the N-word. You know what usually happened? They got smacked for it. We've got to go back to a time where you're going to say the dumb stuff. Don't be surprised if someone or a group of someone smacks you down and puts you in your place. And I've said this before, and I was telling Zach this during the break. I still believe the country went down. I was going to say went to hell, but didn't want to. But when we stopped letting little 5-year-olds beat each other up in the sandbox, once you didn't learn at a young age that you don't get to say and do everything and anything that you want to do at any time to be part of society. Once that was gone, now you've got a bunch of people who now they feel emboldened to say whatever they want to whomever. Then if you don't like it, that's your problem, snowflake. And the reality is, look, I've never been offended by anything someone said. I've been angry by it, and I've smacked a couple of people every once in a while for it. But this idea that you're a snowflake if you don't want me to say things. No, I think we need to learn to be better people, more respectful of each other. So the fact that you've got a group in this country who feels emboldened that they're going to walk our streets and slap graffiti on our walls in the name of hatred, in the name of hating our neighbors, should be something that we unite around. Should be especially my pious ones, the ones who need to get up in the middle of a crowded restaurant and shout their prayer for everyone to hear. How about we use those people to go out and shout this stuff down? Republican friends, how about if you don't want me calling your party the party of Nazis and the party of white supremacists, how about coming out and saying no? How about saying no? We're not going to stand up for these people. We're not going to be associated with them. We're not going to court their votes. We're not going to bring them to our rallies. We're not going to use them for muscle anytime we want to go against somebody else. But they're not going to do that because it's to their core, sadly, who they are. And this, again, for the rest of us, the silent majority who watches this stuff and just shakes our head and goes, well, it's all going to hell anyway. This is where we go. We should be organizing. We should be coming together to stand up against this stuff, so that instead of having to have policemen, guarding every church, maybe the neighborhood, the community comes together and says, we're going to make sure that synagogue is safe. Maybe it's us. So my hope is on Hate Day that maybe the rest of us, and I hate sounding this way, but maybe we show a little love. I'm not the sentimental type, but maybe start showing our neighbors we like them. Just a thought. Want to hear yours.
In no way, shape, or form will Norfolk Southern get off the hook for the mess that they created.
EPA takes control of toxic Ohio train derailment disaster 3 weeks later. Right-wing media tries to weaponize Ohio disaster into culture war fodder. Plus, surprise, the oil and gas industry has failed to cut climate-warming methane emissions as promised.
All of those broken promises and more straight ahead. From BradBlog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
Trump, who is running in next year's presidential election, met with community members and local officials to get an update on cleanup efforts on the ground. As part of his visit, he also donated more than a dozen pallets of water and cleaning supplies.
Oh boy, a dozen. This is your Green News Report.
We're bringing thousands of bottles of water, Trump water, actually, most of it. Some of it we had to go to a much lesser quality water.
Okay, Desi Doyen, CNN is reporting that in the Ohio train derailment disaster, Norfolk Southern, the train company, is paying $6.5 million to help affected residents. Meanwhile, they note, the rail company paid its shareholders $7.5 billion. What, no Trump water as well to go with it?
Apparently not. The Biden Environmental Protection Agency asserted its legal authority this week to take control of the cleanup of the toxic chemical train derailment disaster in East Palestine, Ohio.
Finally.
3 weeks after the incident, the EPA announced sweeping enforcement actions against railroad company Norfolk Southern and compelled the company to pay the entire cleanup bill.
Good.
At a press conference, EPA Administrator Michael Regan said he knows the EPA cannot undo the nightmare visited on residents, but reassured the community that it won't be left to handle the aftermath alone after the news cameras leave.
Norfolk Southern will pay for cleaning up the mess that they created and the trauma that they inflicted on this community and impacted Beaver County residents. We're not going to leave this community to manage this aftermath alone.
Well, one might wonder what has taken them so long to get there. On the other hand, Ohio Governor Mike DeWine doesn't seem to have wanted the federal government there at all.
Pennsylvania's Attorney General has opened a criminal investigation into the company's actions. Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg also announced a package of reforms and asked Congress to untie the department's hands on enforcement, like increasing maximum fines for rail safety violations that are currently capped at just over $200,000.
Why is it the Pennsylvania Attorney General who's taking action here, not Ohio's Attorney General?
That's an excellent question.
Thank you.
Disgraced former President Donald Trump staged a visit to East Palestine, unintentionally highlighting his own record of slashing regulations on both rail safety and hazardous chemicals. The Trump administration repealed several rules on the grounds that the cost to industry outweighed any potential benefits, but an AP analysis found the Trump administration underestimated the costs of future derailments by more than $100 million. Republicans and right-wing media are trying to weaponize the derailment by attacking the federal response, but omitting, as noted, that Ohio's Republican Governor Mike DeWine still has yet to formally request a federal disaster declaration.
By the way, I hope someone has checked that Trump water for hazardous chemicals. Just saying.
The Biden White House countered that congressional Republicans and Trump officials, quote, owe East Palestine an apology for selling them out to rail industry lobbyists when they dismantled Obama-era safety rules.
It is darling that suddenly Republicans have decided to become so disturbed about all of this. Where were those same Republicans when people couldn't return to their homes because of the toxic air in Porter Ranch out here in California, thanks to the natural gas industry? Where were those Republicans when toxic lead-poisoned water was being fed to the town of Flint, Michigan? All of a sudden, when it's a bunch of Republicans who are affected by all of this with a Democrat in the White House, suddenly they decide to give a damn. Go figure.
In other news, a new report by the International Energy Agency finds that, surprise, the fossil fuel industry is failing to repair its methane leaks despite the industry's pledges to do so. The IEA says the oil and gas industry can cheaply reduce methane emissions by 75% using existing technologies, and it said halting non-emergency flaring and venting of gas into the atmosphere, quote, is the most single impactful measure countries can take. Methane matters because it is a more more potent climate warming gas than carbon dioxide over a 20-year period.
I'm sure Fox News and all the Republicans are furious about all of that methane poisoning people around the country, right? For much more on all of these stories and the ones we couldn't get to today, check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. Find, follow, and share us planet-wide on the Facebooks, Twitters, and Mastodons at Green News Report.
Are you tired of think tank approved corporate news and commentary? Are you tired of CEOs telling you what to think, who to hate, and who to vote for? Well, welcome to the Rick Smith Show. We don't take orders from some boardroom, and we don't do focus groups or talking points. We don't work for them, and we never will. I'm Rick Smith, and I work for you. Join us daily at thericksmithshow.com and download the podcast and never miss a minute.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
You know how I talk about, changing the world by, changing your little piece of it? And if all of us decided to do that, get involved, with your local organization, if you're a church person, that, if you're a union person, that, if you're, whatever gets you involved in your local community, you want to do it. You want to change the world, change your little piece of it. And if we all did that, we might not have to have a National Day of Hate, which is just bizarre to me that someone would go, that's a good idea. We should do that. Leave it to the Nazis. But here to come up and say, hey, how do we change our little piece of it and get involved? I've asked my good friend Steve Pearson to come talk with us. He's the host of the How We Win podcast, but also decided he's going to throw his name in and hat into the ring to run for the California State Assembly. Steve, thanks for taking time for us.
Rick, it's so good to be with you. Thank you for having me on. I appreciate it.
So let me ask the first dumb question that I ask everybody who decides they're going to run for office. Why? Why would you put yourself through? Why you put yourself through this, Dave?
That's not a dumb question. It's a totally reasonable question. I didn't see myself doing this. As you said, I host a podcast. I've been working in the progressive media space, using that as a tool to get more people involved in our politics and volunteering. I've worked for an organization called Swing Left for a number of years, helping do the same thing, win elections for good Democrats. And I've been working with the California Democratic Party as an elected delegate and chair of the organizing committee for the last 4 years, also doing the same thing, trying to get, good Democrats elected to vote on things that I care about. And, I guess the old saying goes, if you hang around a barbershop long enough, you're going to end up getting a haircut. It's just this seat opened up because of a domino effect of Adam Schiff running for Senate and my Assembly member Laura Friedman running for Adam Schiff's congressional seat. And now it's an opportunity to serve in my home where I've lived for almost 30 years and make a real impact on people's lives, on working people's lives. And that's what, I think a lot of us have been doing for years, is just where can we make the biggest impact? How can we help people? And this is just an awesome and humbling opportunity to do that.
So what's the message then? I mean, I know, like you said, you've been doing this a long time. I say Democrats are crummy at messaging. What's Steve Pearson's message? Isn't that a great? Isn't that the greatest setup you've ever gotten?
Yeah, thanks. You're crumbing at it. So prove me wrong. I don't think Democrats have a messaging problem because our policies and our platform are wildly popular with the majority of Americans. The biggest problems that Democrats have is we are tied to government. Right? We're the party of government. And people have zero trust in government. There was a recent poll that had, and I'm not sure exactly of the numbers, but approximately 60% of Americans thought if they made enough noise, got out in the streets, used their voices, that they could influence companies, they could influence corporations to do the right thing. That same poll had like 10% of them feeling like they could influence politicians to do the same thing. There's just a a very, distrust of government. Government gets a low approval, and Democrats are the party of government. We're tied to that. So I think that's where we really have the biggest problem. How we solve that is we actually make people's lives better, and then we talk about it. And that's what the Biden administration did over the last 2 years. They passed transformative legislation that is going to improve people's lives. Those programs are going to start hitting people in their neighborhoods and communities over the next couple of years. So their lives are going to get better. They're going to get relief from prescription drug prices. They're going to get jobs by, these infrastructure projects coming. We have an historic investment in climate. We just need to talk about that and make sure that people know it's Democrats that fought for those things. And Republicans are going to take credit for it. They are, even though they fought us every step of the way.
No, and you're spot on your assessment. And I've been saying it for years that Democrats do a terrible job of tooting their own horn. The one thing that I give credit to Donald Trump over is, man, he was the best self-promotion guy who's ever lived. I mean, he's one of the greatest carnival barkers ever. Because you ask people about infrastructure, and they think Trump actually did something outside of holding, Trump week or infrastructure weeks every week with bizarre photo ops. He never actually got anything done, but he did a lot of messaging. And this is where Democrats need to take that message and run with that. Say what they've done, stand on what they've done, and be proud of it. So as an assembly member in the position that you're running, how do you then use that position to make people's lives better? What are the policy aims? What are the ideas that you're bringing to the table?
Yeah, thank you. It's really exciting to be a progressive coming into a supermajority in California, which is the fourth largest economy in the world, the state of California. We have a $280 billion budget. And, when you look at what's happening federally right now, not a lot's going to get done, but we can do a lot in California. We can lead, and where California goes, there goes the nation as well. We have an urgent need to address homelessness, and this is not just an issue for Los Angeles, where I live, or for the state of California. This is a societal failing. And we have some programs that we are putting in place that we can continue to accelerate when the political will is there to take those tough votes and to build more housing and serve the needs of people. 4 to 5 people are dying on the streets in Los Angeles every day. This is egregious, and it's just awful. It's heartbreaking. So we can do that. We have to go further and faster on, climate change resiliency. We've done some great things in California. The woman who has my seat, the assembly member who has my seat right now, Laura Friedman, who is vacating, as I said, to run for Congress, she's been spectacular on the environment. So I'm looking forward to carrying that torch and going even further with that. And then, practically for me, my healthcare is a very, very personal issue to me. My daughter was a preemie. She was 1.5 pounds when she was born. She was born 3.5 months early.
Wow.
And if we didn't have amazing union health insurance, we would have been devastated by that. Our family would have been ruined. The bill was over $1 million. And too many people don't have that kind of access to health insurance like we did through our union. Too many people are one injury or one illness away from complete financial ruin. So we have the opportunity to pass single-payer healthcare, CalCare, here in California, and I can't wait to get there and be a champion for that.
Yeah, no, you said $1 million, and you got to thank the Affordable Care Act for taking caps off of health insurance. Because I remember, I worked at a place, we had union health care, but they capped $1 million per person, and we had a friend who his wife went through that, and we had to go and petition and do all kinds of stuff to get the union to raise that. But the fact of the matter is, without the Affordable Care Act, that cap for many people would have been in place, which
Yeah.
Wow. And how is your child?
Oh, she's great. She's 20 now. She's a sophomore in college. She's studying to be a film editor. She's brilliant, and she got great health care. We have something called the Regional Center here in California that gave her occupational therapy and physical therapy in her young years, and she's awesome. She's my favorite.
Good for her. You're listening to the Rick Smith Show. We're here with Steve Pearson, host of the How We Win podcast, also candidate for California State Assembly. If you want to check out his website, pearsonforcalifornia.com. That's pearsonforca.com. We'll get links out on social media. You can take a look at that. So let me ask you the other question I ask people who run for office. What's the hill that Steve Pearson dies on? That everyone says we're going to compromise, we're going to go, and we're going to get stuff done. What's that one thing that you go, this is where my passion is. This is it. This is the hill I die on.
Well, it's people. I mean, I'm on the right show because I'm doing this for working people. Like I said, I look for an opportunity to help people wherever I can. It's something that I learned how to be of service early on in my life. I struggled with addiction. I got sober when I was 19, and a central tenet of my life has been to be of service to other people. And like I said, my wife and I both are almost 30-year union members, and I'm going to be fighting for working people. That's what I came. That's what I'm coming here to do. That's what I'm going to Sacramento to do. And I've been so blessed early on in this campaign. My first endorsement came from none other than Dolores Huerta, the union civil rights icon. And so that's the hill I will die on. I will be fighting for people. I will be fighting to lift people out of poverty. I'll be fighting for renters, and just any program that I can do to lift people up, because obviously there's so much division in our country right now. I mean, you talk about tomorrow being whatever this National Day of Hate or thing. We are divided. Hate is stoked by the people who want us to not look at what's really going on. It's not so much a left and right issue. It's a top and bottom issue. And that's what's happening in our country. And the people at the top stoke the hate, stoke the fear, stoke the paranoia, so that you don't see that they're taking money from all of us. It's not a zero-sum game. If we lift people out of poverty, if we champion working people, we are creating a robust economy for everybody. We're not taking pie away from somebody. We're baking more pies. We're making a bigger pie that we can all share in. So that's the hill I die on. I'm here for working people.
So if for anybody's listening who may be in your area, how can they help? I'm sure donations always help.
That does, of course. Sadly, it's egregious. We were talking before we went on the air about elections and in the account, how long you have to run for and the type of money that goes into them. I sure would love this money to go directly to housing, for instance. But I'm excited to have so much support from people, from my fellow resistance buddies who started out in the 2016 after Trump was elected. So if you want to join the persistence, as I say, and contribute to the campaign, we would be very, very grateful. Any amount is really helpful. You can go, as you said, to pearsonforcalifornia.com and chip in there, or just sign up to get information, sign up to volunteer. I'd be grateful.
No, it's great stuff. Because look, some of the stuff that you guys are doing out there, I really like the fast food workers. That FAST Act that was passed. That's going to basically give an entire industry of fast food workers a seat at literally a seat at the table, a reasonable wage, benefits, decent opportunities, that kind of stuff. I would love to see all across the country. Also, the fact that, if I'm not mistaken, Newsom said you guys are going to start producing your own insulin to make sure that it's something that isn't going to cost you an arm and a leg. There's a lot that we can do to use government. As I say all the time, we do things, through our government collectively that we can't do individually. So I see some of the things that you're doing, and I would love to see it go across the country.
Yeah, I used to say that California was a progressive test lab, but it's not really a test lab because we know these policies work. So it's really where we get to implement these, lift people up, and like I said earlier, where California goes the rest of the country. And you mentioned the FAST Act. There's actually a ballot measure put up by opponents of the FAST Act that are, first of all, effectively stopping the implementation of the FAST Act until this ballot measure goes through. And so we have to fight that too, because fast food workers have been left out of the negotiating, left out of collective bargaining for too long, and this is a really powerful piece of legislation, which once again will champion workers.
So last question, 30 seconds. Yeah, why Steve Pearson? What's the ad? What's the elevator pitch?
I'm still working on my elevator pitch because I just announced, but I'll tell you, I came from an organizing background. I came from this community. I've worked in this community for almost 30 years, and si se puede. We can do this together. We were the resistance. Now we are the persistence, and the persistence is coming to Sacramento.
There you go. Good stuff, Steve. I appreciate the time. I'll look forward to having you back again as this continues. Good stuff, man.
Thank you, Rick. Appreciate it, man.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Steve Pearson. Make sure you check out his website, pearsonforca.com, pearsonforcalifornia.com. We'll get links out on social media how you can take a look at that. Maybe a donation or maybe volunteer. Want to hear your thoughts? Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Quick break. Right back.
We are AFGE, the American Federation of Government Employees. We represent 700,000 federal and D.C. government workers who are the vital threads of the fabric of American life. We support our nation's military. We take care of our nation's veterans. We protect our nation's borders. We respond to our nation's crises and natural disasters. We provide services to our nation's seniors. The American Federation of Government Employees. We work for America.
The phone lines are open. Give Rick a call at 1-866-416-RICK. That's 1-866-416-7425.
We are AFGE, the American Federation of Government Employees. We represent 700,000 federal and D.C. government workers who are the vital threads of the fabric of American life. We support our nation's military. We take care of our nation's veterans. We protect our nation's borders. We respond to our nation's crises and natural disasters. We provide services to our nation's seniors. The American Federation of Government Employees. We work for America.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
I gotta tell you, it's kind of funny. The reports coming out of East Palestine, Ohio, Trump's visit. You go, one, Trump don't look good. I mean, there's some pictures coming out of there. No, seriously, he does not look good. He looks like, he's having a rough go of it. But the story is coming out that he brought in all this water, and how the story is kind of evolving, and the questions being asked is this the Trump water that went out of business 13 years ago? Is this what was left in the warehouse from 13 years ago? Because, and this would be so Trump, that this is stuff you should have thrown out, but you're going to give it away and then say it's the best water, it's the best water ever, it's fabulous water, it's terrific water, it's tremendous water, it's the best water that water's ever watered. And then say, because he actually said, well, then you can have the inferior water, the not so good water. Except if it was sitting in those plastic bottles from 10 years ago, 13 years ago, if it's been sitting in those bottles for 13 years, the kind of bottles that we know now leached chemicals into the water, is he causing an even bigger environmental disaster for the people who are drinking this water? Is he poisoning these people with his Trump water? I mean, is this the, and this is the weird thing, these are his voters. This is Trump country we're talking about. These were people who were out there in force, rallying in his favor, and screaming Trump, 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 and the Go Brandon stuff was all over the place. These are his folks. So is he poisoning his own people with the water? Because understand, there was some water with his name on it, and he made light of this, and then there wasn't. The inferior water, I think he called it. So that makes me go, if you were going to take a couple dozen pallets of water, wouldn't you just have the company that threw your label on those bottles do all of them? Wouldn't that be how that works? Why would you only choose some of them? Unless you were getting rid of the stuff that, well, just hanging around, we got nothing else to do with it. I was going to wait for a good disaster to write it off on my taxes anyway. Yeah. But this is an interesting thing. This is an interesting question. Is he actually poisoning his own people? Now remember, the whole right wing, screed about COVID being a hoax, killing off more Republicans than everyone else. I don't know, man. Interesting times. Interesting side of the fence over there. Here's another story. Interesting side of the fence. This woman's name is Deborah Sullivan. She's known in the meme world as the meme queen. She's the QAnon meme queen. Yep, the Q kooks, the people who think that Democrats are running this Democratic elites, not all Democrats, just the elite ones, that they're running a child sex trafficking ring. The Pizzagate folks. The basement that didn't exist, that had all the children in it, that made the guy go with a gun and hold up a pizza place. Yeah. Evidently, she's been really prolific in her work. I gotta wonder if she's actually got a job. But she's produced more than 4,500 memes about the pedophile, the pedocrats, and the pedophile conspiracy. Many of them, that are saying that Trump was the hero. He was out there fighting the good fight and taking on the secret cabal of child traffickers. You've heard the nonsense. You got to know where this is going, right? Because I'm not going to just bring up some kook for no reason. Because again, she's deep into this world, because she knows Donald Trump is out there fighting the sex traffickers and the pedophiles. Evidently, her son earlier this month was convicted of repeatedly abusing his stepdaughter in Oklahoma City. Actually, a pedophile. Now she's defending him he's innocent, and actually went after the 12-year-old girl, calling her a horrible liar, and I'm sure much. And I gotta wonder when the memes are going to start against this 12-year-old. What's interesting, she's now going to the Q kooks and saying, please, Q crazies, help get Trump to come out and defend her pedophile son. This is the kind of stuff that's just, you can't make it up. You cannot. I couldn't sit down and tell you, and it be anywhere believable that a person would be out there being the savior and the crusader. I guess I could. It reminds me of when I was a kid. There was a guy who was the number one donor in our parish. Now, we were a poor parish, so of course the church and everybody worshiped this guy. In fact, I think he may have won the car raffle like 2 of the 5 years that I remember, because he just donated him back. But I remember him on Sunday, being all over the priest, and being the big show, and but he was on Saturday night. He was walking the stroll with the hookers, and it's one of those things, family man, right there in the front row, with the wife and 3 kids on Sunday, big smiles on their face. And Saturday nights, doing the roll. It's that kind of thing. It's that kind of hypocrisy. It's that kind of just pure ridiculousness. They're the ones always pointing their finger at somebody. And I find a lot of these Q people to be in that world. The hate people who are, but I guess I shouldn't be surprised, should I? Are you surprised by a story like this? Because it seems in this world, the people who are out there, saying all this stuff is going on and believing there's all this conspiracy are the ones actually doing it. I mean, that's the thing that gets me. When someone makes an accusation and says, them over on the other side, I know they're doing this. And you go, how do you know? Oh, yeah, because you're probably doing it. You're probably the one. What a strange time. But I hope the son gets what he deserves. How dare you? Hope she gets what she deserves as well. Sick people. Want to hear your thoughts? Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Quick break. Right back. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1965. That was the day the Drug and Hospital Employees Union Local 1199 sent a telegram to President Lyndon Baines Johnson. The message declared the union's stand against U.S. involvement in the Vietnam War. They were the first union local to take an official stand against the war. However, it should not have surprised anyone that Local 1199 was willing to take such a public stand. From their founding, they have been deeply committed to broad social justice unionism. The union started in 1932 in New York City. In the beginning, their membership was mostly Jewish men working in drugstores. During their first decade, they led pickets for a living wage and against segregation. During the 1950s, they held organizing drives in the city's not-for-profit hospitals. This brought many African American and Latino women into the union. These workers were often paid wages as low as $32 per week and worked extremely long hours. The union helped them win a $100 a week minimum wage. The union had become an important voice for workers in the city's nonprofit hospitals. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. called Local 1199 the authentic conscience of the labor movement. The union expanded its organizing beyond New York in 1969. They helped organize a successful strike of hospital workers in Charleston, South Carolina. From there, they launched organizing campaigns of hospital workers in other states. Over the years, the union has stood in solidarity with Cesar Chavez and Dolores Huerta's efforts to organize farm workers. They opposed apartheid in South Africa. They were also an early opponent of the war in Iraq. Today, the local is affiliated with SEIU, the Service Employees International Union. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
No one needs another outrage to worry about, but here's one that could literally be your last worry. Our hospitals are killing us. Not that the staffers are going room to room snuffing out patients, of course, but hospital owners and top executives are nonetheless killing thousands of ill Americans entrusted to their care. They are doing it by deliberately short-staffing their facilities and short-changing sick and injured people they're richly paid to serve. At the core of this outrage is a fatal structural flaw in our healthcare system, namely that these are no longer our hospitals. Instead of being public or nonprofit entities for the common good, focused squarely on patients, hospitals today tend to be private operations controlled by corporate profiteers. Pitting patients against profits is no way to run a hospital, for it means money will ultimately rule over health and over life itself. Ask a nurse. These dedicated professionals are the solid pillars of American health. More than doctors and way more than administrators, nurses make a hospital function, providing the primary care and constant on-site monitoring that are the essence of an ethical, healthy system. Yet, thousands have already fled the work they love. Another third plan to leave this year, and thousands more are going on strike. Why? Because the profit system demands massive staff cuts, leaving way too few nurses to meet the basic needs of patients, causing burnout among nurses and unnecessary deaths of people they care for. A damning 2021 study revealed that forcing fewer nurses to tend to an ever larger caseload effectively killed more than 4,000 New York hospital patients in the previous 2 years alone. This is Jim Hightower saying, yet the corporate powers insist on treating nurses as just a cost to be cut, arguing that hospitals must have staffing flexibility. In other words, cut nurses, raise profits.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So, interesting bit of news there. Everyone knows Marty Walsh is stepping down as Secretary of Labor. Going to take the gig with the NHL Players Association. And the question is, who's going to replace him? Who will be the next Labor Secretary? And I said from the beginning, you can go back to, right when the Biden administration began picking their folks. I said my choice for Labor Secretary was Sarah Nelson, and I'm glad to see that she's one of the top contenders that they're vetting at this moment to replace Marty Walsh. I think she would be fantastic I think Marty Walsh did a great job of getting out and putting a good face on the Department of Labor. I want somebody who's going to use it much the way you see Republicans doing, moving in a direction that's going to help working people and really making it the advocate that it should be. Now, it's going to be interesting to see which way they go. There's the top labor official who's, I guess, would be the acting if they don't find someone before Walsh leaves. There's Julie Hsu. That's her. There's Sarah, who's the head of the flight attendants union. And then they're throwing DeMarcus Smith out as well. And we'll see, he's obviously the executive director of the National Football League's Players Union. So I'm going to be interested to see where the administration goes. My choice from the beginning has always been our friend Sarah Nelson. So if I can throw my hat in the ring on that, that's where my vote would go. Anyway, here to share some thoughts on the top stories of the day. And hey, the National Day of Hate's coming up, so get your hate on. That's our good friend Bob Ney, former Ohio congressman and political analyst, to share some thoughts. Bob, thanks for taking time for us.
Thank you, Rick.
So Saturday is going to be the National Day of Hate. The neo-Nazis and the National Socialist idiots, whatever, they're having their big day of hate. Will you be celebrating?
No, I think I'll pass that one. Okay. Yeah, I think I made my dislike list years ago, and then had to computerize it, and then I thought, okay, it's not worth reading it. So
it's a lot of effort.
It takes too much. You have to burn a lot of brain cells, to do it. Of course, some of these people aren't going to have brain cells to burn, so it doesn't matter.
There you go. But here's the weird thing: is this was a kind of like a no-brainer, so to speak. You see what I did there? It's kind of like a no-brainer here, where the Republican Party should be denouncing this, but I don't see it. I'm not seeing it.
It's the United States Jewish community is on alert because they're planning the white supremacists are planning the Day of Hate, and so the groups are on alert. But and sometimes with these groups, they should be denounced, but also it's just I wish if the media could ignore them, maybe it would help. But we've always said that about a lot of the groups that come to towns and everybody gets excited about them, and it's better to denounce them. But if they could just be ignored and go away, it'd be so nice, wouldn't it?
It would. I mean, if we didn't have to deal with Nazis, that would be a good thing. If we were a country that didn't have these problems, but to that point, we're coming up on the 1-year anniversary of what's going on in Ukraine, and Nazis are kind of at the center of that as well.
Well, with it was an interesting announcement that was just made about China, and I was asked earlier today about were there any of the behind the scene deals on this, and I think that the fact that Blinken, our Secretary of State, went to Munich and they got the balloon issue settled. Neither country, backtrack. We said, hey, you have a spy balloon, and China said they don't. But they got that out front to get rid of the balloon talk. And then the same minister that met with Blinken went to meet with Putin. So I have to believe that somewhere along the line we pushed the issue in back channel talks for China to at least do what it did, which is a good step to say, there needs to be a potential ceasefire.
Yeah, no, there needs to be a ceasefire, and Russia needs to leave, pack their bags, and go home.
Right, exactly.
The thing that's interesting to me is I'm hearing all these people go, well, they should the diplomacy. I'm going, okay, what do you think you can deal with? What's the deal? Well, give them this portion and that portion. No, that's not how this works. That's not diplomacy. That's just stealing parts and giving stuff away, which is exactly why Ukraine is fighting. That's the whole point.
Yeah, and the ceasefire, if it can happen, if it's violated, then everything has to go back to the way it was. But the ceasefire in itself is okay as long as, and you raise a great point, all of a sudden conditions aren't thrown out on the table. At that point, the Ukraine would have to say no. for example, if Russia wants to, we'll do a ceasefire, but we need the eastern part of the Ukraine. No, that's not in the works.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing to me. And look, you're a little bit older than I am, but we both grew up kind of in the same era during the Cold War. Mm-hmm. I'm struggling with the number of people that I see siding with Putin in this moment. And maybe it's just maybe I'm just too simple-minded in this. My distrust and disdain for for Soviet overreach or Russian overreach. That this is where my mind goes. But I got to tell you, I'm surprised to see so many people, especially on the right, siding with this guy.
Well, here's the thing about what's happened, and this is even beyond the Ukraine. And I agree with you. I mean, I remember, doing drills under desks in case we were nuked.
Yep, because those Catholic school desks prevented nuclear fallout.
And we said prayers too.
Yep.
I remember that, clearly doing that. Friends of ours had built bomb shelters in the backyard, with cement blocks in the ground and things. So yes, it's in our minds. And then Putin took over after Russia, the Soviet Union was broken up, and then Russia was, quote, becoming a democracy, and Putin took over. And there were a lot of people that thought Putin was okay, and he acted like he was okay. And then his KGB side always was there, never went away. But to me, the stopping point here, where you draw the red line, is not just the invasion of Ukraine, but also they have used the nuclear word. Putin's done it. His defense ministers have done it. I mean, to threaten to do nukes. I wish we would have, we meaning not just us, but NATO, would have done a flyover a long time ago. Stop them from the flyover. When they start to use the word nuclear, and because they don't have their way, there's trouble. Yeah. There's trouble for the world and trouble for Europe.
Now, what do you make of now? I guess Putin says they're not pulling out of the New START treaty, but suspending it, pausing it. I don't know what that means. What exactly did he do?
Well, I mean, I don't think we know, because Putin will use all types of verbiage, and now that is one of the problems with the ceasefire. Because there's so many mixed signals. On one hand, China goes over to meet with Putin. They say, well, there's going to be a potential ceasefire. We should have that. Then the other hand, Russia suspends participation in the new START nuclear treaty. So where is he going? Where is he really at? I don't think anybody knows.
Yeah. What do you make of Ted Cruz saying that this is good for us, that him pulling out is good for us?
I'm sorry, Ted Cruz saying?
That him pulling out of the New START treaty is actually good for the U.S. He tweeted out today that he believes it's good for us.
No, it's not. I mean, it's not. This is a nuclear treaty between Russia and the U.S. And by Putin pulling out of it, he is suspending, taking a step back from the last remaining nuclear arms treaty between the U.S. and Russia. And then he's vowing to still continue the military campaign. I think Ted Cruz is wrong. Look, no matter how much we can't stand Putin or, everything he's done, on the other side of this thing, for Putin to pull out of the communications on the START treaty is not a good thing. That should continue irregardless of what's going on in the Ukraine. So I think, Cruz is wrong. I mean, here's what I would say to Ted Cruz. Okay, so what do you do now? What's your exit plan? If there's no communication on the START treaty, what's your exit plan?
Yeah, no, and that's my point in all of this. Look, okay, so we're calling for diplomacy, and I'm with you. Let's call for diplomacy. I want diplomacy. I want this to stop. But by starving Ukraine of the opportunity to defend themselves, and that's all we're doing. We're not sending our troops over there. I was not in favor of putting U.S. anything over Ukraine. Wasn't in favor of putting any boots on the ground. This is a Ukraine thing. Give them the tools they need. Give them what they need to defend themselves. It doesn't make any sense to me to now pull that back. And look, this could be a long drawn out war. And again, as we as Americans, I guess our appetite for war is dwindling. But if we do allow them to pull back, I then got to worry that down the road it gets worse. Because, I still believe that the idea is to get the old band back together. What happens if he goes into Estonia or Latvia or Lithuania or Poland, and then NATO's got to get involved? We are then talking nuclear war.
Right. Look, Zelensky has said that, he'll await details on the China, request for a peace plan. So he said that, which is a good response. And the reason being is that he's not, objecting to it because is this a silent way for Putin to try to save face and get out of this, et cetera, et cetera. But on the other hand, Zelensky's not dumb, and we can't be either. I keep saying the we, Rick, but it's us and NATO when I say we.
Right.
We can't be, ignorant about this. If they do eventually have a ceasefire, there's got to be such caution, because if that's just an attempt for Putin to all of a sudden do a surprise move, then it's really, really bad. So now, the other thing, too, in the China proposition for a ceasefire, of course, what's out there, end all the sanctions for Russia.
And do we do that?
Well, the only way we could do it, look, the Iran nuclear treaty, although, yeah, sure, we didn't get the ballistic missiles. I fully understand that, and we transferred money to Iran. I understand that too. But the Iran nuclear treaty and the agreement to take the sanctions back worked because the centrifuges were rolled back. It worked. And then Trump became president, and for the first year, it continued to work. And then John Crazy Bolton came in, and Pompeo, and of course the two of them never saw a war they didn't like, and then all of a sudden they canceled everything. So people said, well, see, the sanctions didn't work. No, the sanctions did work, but something had to kick in. Iran had to have the inspectors on the ground. Iran had to take back the centrifuges. So could the sanctions work? Yes, they could. However, the sanctions aren't going to work if the process in the United States and anybody else involved in the sanctions at the UN, if they roll them back and then Russia decides to pull out, this has to be one of those moves where Russia stops what it's doing and reverses itself, and then the sanctions start to reverse, which is okay.
Yeah.
If just like the Iran nuclear deal, but again, the deal was canceled and everything went back to the way it was.
So what do you do with, because there are people saying Putin's guilty of war crimes. Do you believe he's guilty of war crimes?
Oh, yes.
So what do you do?
Yes,
Do you just go, okay, we're going to have a ceasefire. We're going to go back to our respective corners. What as a globe, what do we then do? Do we just forget about it and move on? Or is there got to be some accountability?
Well, the reality of that, my answer of what I would like to see is accountability, The Hague, et cetera, et cetera. What I know is going to happen, if Russia leaves, the sanctions start to reverse, somebody might file a normal, more, filing against him at The Hague for war crimes. But you know what? It's not going to be pushed. It won't be pushed by anybody.
What do you make of Trump saying that in 24 hours he'd just get everybody into a room and knock heads and get a deal done? He'd get it done.
With Putin?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. Putin's a chess player, and a lot of times, we think he's going a certain direction, and he's 7 other moves to the other way.
George Bush's, I looked into his soul, and that thing in Helsinki, I don't have great hope. But speaking of Trump, and I got to change topics here real quick. Was in East Palestine on Wednesday, brought some water with him. I guess the question I have, how much was the Trump water? How much was the inferior water? And was the Trump water the 13-year-old Trump water? Was it vintage water?
Well, I looked at the Newsweek fact check on it, and it seemed to say that the water was not, 13 years old. Here's the problem with all of this. What boots Pete Buttigieg wore, the water Trump brought.
Yeah. No.
And there's some real significant horror stories up there still existing. I mean, and people are never going to be able to sell their homes, and the chemicals that are still potentially in the ground. My granddaughter was supposed to play volleyball up there. They've canceled all of it and moved it about 15 miles away. And like I told my daughter today, make sure when they go to the gym, which is now 15 miles away, they don't drink any of the tap water,
Yeah, East Palestine's the New Mexico.
I mean, so, and I know, Trump went up there and he did all that. And Buttigieg, he mishandled this. The actual reality is there was communication from transportation and FEMA, et cetera, early on, with the governor of Ohio and the governor's office. It's just that they mishandled, Buttigieg mishandled, kind of almost panicked. He took a picture yesterday of a reporter following him in the street and all that. And I don't know, there was just something that went wrong on the communication, end of it. But then he goes up there, he shows up, and the story becomes his boots. I mean, give me a break,
Yeah, no. That's our media culture. I mean,
corporate media, talk about trite.
Yep.
His boots became the story. I don't care if he was wearing, house slippers. That's not the story, and they made it the story. So It just became a fiasco. They've got to dig into it, find out about the safety brakes, how you label things. They weren't labeled, and then number one, what are they going to do with the town?
No, and that's the question. And this is you've given me an idea of what has to happen. Then I think these railroads should have to buy up these people's homes at the other day's market value, and then pay their costs to move and all of that stuff as well, to make them whole. I mean, there's got to be a way to make people whole in this.
Well, I was saying this today when I was asked about this. Well, how far is their liability? The break, the federal government hollowed out the break. Well, here's the point. If you've got a utility truck, in Ohio, American Electric Power, and the utility truck goes through your living room, right? You don't start to say, well, they should have had a guardrail out front. The utility truck goes through your living room. The utility company makes your house whole.
Yep.
That's the bottom line. Now, it was one house maybe that it hit, but I use that example because, the railroad needs to make the entire town whole, the entire thing. The railroad has huge profits. And if you look at the potential railroad strike that was out there, it was about people working too long, about how the railroad treated them. It was about safety factors. And now Norfolk and Southern are responsible.
Yep. And they should take some of that stock buyback money and make these people whole. And that should be the
not
message.
25,000. They need to, help them because the houses are going to be worthless.
Yeah. No, and like the one guy in the video said, anybody going to eat any of the crops coming from out of the soil here?
Right.
Probably not.
I don't think so.
There is so much here. But, Bob, I appreciate the time. As always, good stuff, my friend.
Thank you, Rick.
Got to take a quick break, right back to wrap things up. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk. Are you tired of think tank approved corporate news and commentary? Are you tired of CEOs telling you what to think, who to hate, and who to vote for? Well, welcome to the Rick Smith Show. We don't take orders from some boardroom, and we don't do focus groups or talking points. We don't work for them, and we never will. I'm Rick Smith, and I work for you. Join us daily at thericksmithshow.com and download the podcast and never miss a minute. Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Check out our website, thericksmithshow.com. Remember, email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Questions, comments, something on your mind, by all means, especially the angry stuff. Jimmy writes me, Rick, I never hear you talk about the mass exodus of millionaires leaving blue states. He says New York City saw 1,452 people with wealth over $25 million leave in 2021. He said, the rich aren't going to pay your commie woke taxes. There are over 80,000 millionaires in New York City. And yeah, some of them leave. And, 1,452 people, wealthy, rich people left. You know why? It was 2021. They were getting out of Dodge over the pandemic. They were going to other places. And you know where they went mostly? Yeah, because they actually tracked this stuff. They went to New Jersey. They retired to Florida, like a lot of people do. They went to Connecticut. Those are the top three places that those 1,452 enormously wealthy people went to. And you go, why'd they go to New Jersey? Well, they went to New Jersey to pay similar taxes because it's closer to New York City. Maybe they wanted to get out of the crowded, to get into the Garden State, or as I call it, the Chemical State. Some of them retired to Florida, and they went through some of the names of the people who went. Carl Icahn, who, he said he went for tax reason. Go down to Florida where you can not pay any taxes. David Tepper, who's worth, like $18 billion, is the owner of the Carolina Panthers. He went down to that area. So you got a bunch of these billionaires who saw a chance to retire into the that's where they went. You saw people of means leaving the city during the pandemic. Yeah, it happened. And your point? The city is thriving. Now, it's interesting. They say that, these 1,400 left. Actually, the number of millionaires in the city has grown by over 10,000 during the last 2 years. So this idea that, oh my God, the rich people are going to leave. Oh, all this clutching of the pearls. They're leaving California. They're going. You know where they're not going? They're not going to your red states like Mississippi or Alabama. They're not. So there's your thoughts, Jimmy. Sue writes, Rick, have you heard about why Oklahoma Senator Jim Inhofe retired? Other than he was as old as dirt, I had to look this one up because I didn't know what the rationale was. Evidently, Jim Inhofe, the former senator, the guy who said about climate change, that there's no such thing as climate change because of the snowball he had in his hand? Because of snowballs, no such thing. Evidently, his decision to retire was due to side effects from long COVID. That's what I guess has been reported. He had COVID. He had long COVID. Inhofe said 5 or 6 others have long COVID, but I'm the only one who admits it. Now remember, Inhofe is a guy who voted against multiple aid packages when we were talking about the virus. Remember, it's all a hoax. Yeah, it's all a hoax. Now here's the thing: am I happy to see him go? Not really, because you got crazier. What was that? Mark Wayne Mullen, Oklahoma. Come on. And finally, Elon Musk is back in the news. Evidently, politicians who we used to keep. There was a group that was out there, screenshotting all of their crazy tweets. Anytime they said something cringeworthy, politicians or people running for office, there was someone over at ProPublica who tracked them, and I guess had been doing it since 2012. So when you say dumb stuff that maybe, and then you delete it really quick, I don't want anyone to see that. Evidently, ProPublica is not going to be able to do that anymore. Not because they don't have the money, but because Twitter's not evidently has gone and deleted the function, disabled the function that ProPublica used to track the tweets being deleted. So yeah, the same guy who fired a bunch of people because his tweets weren't getting enough attention, making it easy to delete things so no one remembers. It's Winston Smith on steroids. We're living 1984, folks. Anyway, have a great hate weekend. Spread a little love over hate weekend. Show a little love for a Nazi. I want to hear your thoughts. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. If you miss any portion of the program, make sure you grab the podcast. Thanks so much for being here. We'll see you back here next time.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Email Rick at rick@thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.